thank you so much for inviting me to share my knowledge and experience. As Bev says, I do feel that I have had the privilege of working with the experts, the grievers, and so I guess being a teacher at heart, I really love to share what I've learned. And so in putting this presentation together, I realized that when dealing with mental illness, I think it's many, many losses, one on top of another. It's just, a whole network of losses, and I think that it's very important to honor those. And so I'm kind of working my presentation around that notion. I think that loss by death is very concrete, but I think the losses that are associated with mental illness are abstract and very unrecognized and very, very, very difficult to deal with. And so I guess my goal for you tonight would be, I hope to give you something that you can take home to think about. Maybe in our discussion, I'll talk for a little bit, and then I hope we'll have a nice discussion, share your experiences. So maybe you'll hear something from somebody else, or maybe you'll hear something that I say that you can take home to think about, because I think that's always kind of the sign of a successful talk, is that it lasts longer than just the couple of hours that you're here. So I wanted to start off with this poem called Otherwise by Jane Kenyon. I got out of bed on 2 strong legs. It might have been otherwise. I ate cereal, sweet milk, flawless peach. It might have been otherwise. I took the dog uphill to the birchwood. All morning I did the work I love. At noon, I lay down with my mate. It might have been otherwise. We ate dinner together at a table with silver candlesticks. It might have been otherwise. I slept in a bed in a room with paintings on the walls and planned another day just like this day. But one day, I know, it will be otherwise. So I think that families may feel ripped apart by a diagnosis of mental illness. And I think that just as this tree has been split, that the experience of mental illness is life-altering, and families may feel that they've been ripped apart. Certainly families can be changed forever by a diagnosis. And I think that as you adjust, just as this photo shows that ripping is further away, it's not maybe because it's smaller, but your life grows around it as you adjust. And that's really a key word I'm going to harp on. I harp on some things, and that's one that we're just talking about adjustment. Excuse me. So that the wound doesn't get smaller, but our life grows around it. So I believe it's very important to honor the many losses that are part and parcel of the experience of learning to live with a diagnosis of mental illness for individuals and for families. And so naming, exploring, understanding, expressing the losses associated with mental illness is part of the journey of coming to terms with the situation. So just looking at losses for a minute, some of these losses may be temporary, and so mental illness can be like undulating. It comes and goes, crisis, you go along like a roller coaster, you go along and then whammo and so on. And I think that many of these losses perhaps are very acute in a crisis mode, and then they taper off. So I just wanted to acknowledge that there may be physical health, that the person actually is not able to get out of bed. That's a physical effect, a physical loss that happens in a family. So all of these losses are for the patient, but then I think it's also important to acknowledge the losses that perhaps occur within the family too. Communication changes, maybe the relationship changes, control, roles, family roles change, life as it was. If it's a new diagnosis, I think we have to honor the loss of life as it was, and also hopes and dreams that may change. So these are just kind of ideas. I'm sure if we brainstormed, we could come up with many more losses, both for the patient and the family. But I wanted to just give you kind of the umbrella of what I'm talking about. I think it is very important to look at these losses. Secondary losses are also important. So for example, if the breadwinner is in crisis and unable to work, then that may have financial impact on the family as well. So that's another whole set of losses. So loss, I think, plays a huge role in mental illness. And I think that it causes broken hearts. Now, a term that may be new to you is disenfranchised loss. And this is a loss that is not recognized, not acknowledged, and perhaps not understood. Does that kind of ring a bell a little bit? Some of those terms? Yeah. Yeah, so this I think mental illness can be a disenfranchised loss. And because it's not recognized or acknowledged or understood, then I think sometimes you don't get the support you need. Now, I'm learning tonight, at Supper with Bev, I'm learning what a wonderful organization this is. But I'm wondering about you guys in your families and communities and neighbors and so on, if maybe what you're coping with in families is disenfranchised, you know, because it's not recognized, or maybe people don't understand it, and it's not acknowledged. And I think this just adds another layer of coping, this disenfranchised. And another term that I think is very applicable, Pauline Boss has written a book called Ambiguous Loss. And I think this is especially applicable for families dealing with mental illness where the patient may be perceived as gone, not available maybe for decision making, but where he or she is physically present. So, you know, they're not able to play a dynamic role in the family, although their presence is there. And I think that this notion of ambiguous loss can create a lot of uncertainty. And so it's very confusing. It's difficult to make sense of a situation. Is the loss final or temporary? You know, there's a lot that you don't know. So I think it also leads to ambivalence. And Pauline Boss talks about this as well with ambiguous loss, is that family members may be torn between being hopeful and feeling hopeless. Love-hate, that push-pull. Acceptance of the person, rejection of the disease. Maybe anger at the demands of caregiving, but sad because they're losing a part of the loved one. Accepting the demands or rejecting them. So feelings can be polarized. And I think these are normal feelings to have in a situation. Contributing to the challenge of living and coping with mental illness is the cyclical nature of the disease as family members experience crisis times. And so a crisis time may be followed by turbulent crisis time may be followed by a period of calm, but it's all very confusing. And I think the role of hope changes as well. You know, the hope during a crisis may be one thing, and when you're learning to live with the illness without the crisis, you know, the hopes may be different. So there may be, I think we yearn for stability, and then we're broadsided, you know, by a big wave or tidal wave. I think this is what makes it so difficult, because things happen and change, and all we want is stability. We yearn for change. It's all very scary. Now, how does grief relate to mental illness? In my work with dying patients and families, I have learned that hope changes. The hope for a peaceful death changes perhaps. The hope from getting better changes to hope for a peaceful death. And I think with ambiguous loss, when the situation doesn't change, hope may be present, but in the form of coping on a day-to-day basis. So the role of hope may be ever-changing, and perhaps from the hope of crisis management to the hope of stability and peace. So I'm back to this heart because I think that indeed we can have a broken heart, that as we adjust, it's never exactly the same. And that's why the second heart shows the scars, because we are changed when we're dealing with adjusting to the death of somebody we love, or even to mental illness, to learning to live with it. We are changed. I think that's very important to acknowledge. Adjust is the key word. We're just learning to adjust. And how does that work? And so I'm using one of the models of grief work, William Worden's Tasks of Grief, because I think that it applies equally to dealing with the loss by death or to dealing with a family member diagnosed with mental illness. And the tasks that we need to do in order to adjust, we need to accept the reality of the situation, we need to feel the feelings, and we need to adjust to the changes that happen in our lives. Above all, I think people need a safe, confidential, non-judgmental place to talk about what's happening. So, when we are talking about accepting the reality of the loss, what do we mean by this? And you guys will have better stories than I could possibly give about what the reality has been like for you. My sense is it doesn't happen quickly. It's a slow process. But what I'm taking from my grief work is talking about it and acknowledging it and questioning it and looking at what have we lost. With maybe you've been worried about a child for a long time. As a parent, something's wrong, and then maybe you don't get a diagnosis for many years. And so that reality may be very difficult because it's a reality check and it won't change. As long as you don't have a concrete diagnosis, we always live on hope that something will change. And I think that part of getting a diagnosis is very double-edged, because it means that this is something concrete now that you're dealing with, and at the same time, you don't have that hope that you had at the back of your mind. So I think that makes it very difficult. And so I think it is important to talk within families, professional, in groups, whatever, to talk about what you have lost with the diagnosis of mental illness in your family. What is still present. And I think that, just as one of you said, to be able to look at the positive, we can only do that. We can only look at the present if we acknowledge what is lost. And I think that is very important to do. It's non-judgmental, but it is reality in families, changing roles, changing relationships, and so on. Some of us have been brought up with these are good feelings and these are bad feelings. And I think that puts an extra burden on us. So for example, suppose that you're struggling with a real crisis that ends up with the person being hospitalized, and you're feeling relief because you don't have to worry tonight because they're in the hospital. And so then what I hear is, well, then I felt guilty because I felt relief because he's in the hospital and I'm here. But you see, it's okay to feel that. That's a normal feeling to have, and it's okay to have it. So we beat ourselves up with feelings instead of just saying, feelings are feelings. They're not right, they're not wrong, they're mine, and it's okay to have them. And it just kind of takes that pressure off, that additional burden of questioning what you're feeling. You can't say, okay, today I'm going to feel this. So it's okay. We're not a good society about feelings. This is a mandala that I use in my bereavement support groups, where I have people identify some of the feelings they're having in the top left-hand corner, and then they give each feeling a color, and then they fill in the circle according to how much of each feeling they're having at the moment. So what it's doing, it's making something that's abstract, feelings, concrete. Because after they'll do it, I'll say, okay, so is your mandala right? And they'll make, yeah, it's about right. Or no, I'm way more mad than that. Or I'm not as this. So it's just another tool that I find very helpful that I think you can apply whenever you have any feelings. So, you know, just because you mentioned that, that might be something you could do. Do a mandala and then do it again in three months. And you may, you know, sometimes you think it doesn't change, but that's a way of showing that it does. So yeah, feelings are huge because it's okay to have any feelings. They're not right or wrong, they just are. No matter what feeling you have. And sometimes we keep them hidden. And you know, the more you stuff them down, the more they're going to come out in other ways. They're going to come out in anxiety or panic attacks or not sleeping. So it's very important to be able to express the feelings. And what I've learned in my grief work is that somehow just saying it, like getting what's inside out, helps us let it go. It's just because it's a normal thing. So just expressing feelings or just saying them to somebody, and again in a family, even in a couple, to say, I'm feeling this, this, and this. It's not your job to fix me. It's not my job to fix you. You're just sharing how you're feeling. But, you know, I don't think we do that well. We don't teach kids in schools how to do that. And that's just a way that helps. Just let it out. That's all we're doing, is at that moment we're just getting them out with no judgment. The third task that I think we need to do in order to adjust to the whole situation is we need to look at the changes that happens. How has our life changed? Have the roles in the family changed? Has this person's role changed? You know, what has happened in our family? And so again, it's just acknowledging that, yeah, our life has changed. And it's this way and that way and so on. Again, there's no judgment. It's just that this week we're finding this is really different, or this holiday time, or it doesn't matter what it is. But it's just looking and expressing how, my sense is people think that. They're thinking all of this, but they're not necessarily saying it, you know, to somebody who is also sharing it. Questions might be, you know, am I still a wife? Do I have a father? Are we a couple? Just because the roles are different, maybe this is just in a crisis time where, like, do I have a father? He's not psychologically present. He's there. He's in bed all the time. So I've just taken sentences that people have said to me and thrown them out to you. So, you know, some of them, no, that never crossed my mind or anything. And others may, I'm seeing a few heads nod. So I'm just throwing out, I think it's normal to question this. It may be just at a crisis time, or it may be, you know, over the last 5 years or 10 years, I don't know. But I think it's a normal reaction because, you know, you're dealing with normal reactions to abnormal situations. And we have to keep that in mind. It's a normal reactions. But it's where do we learn about all of this? The other thing that I've learned is that you can't fix, and you can't, you can only walk beside somebody. And that's with you in your own family. If there are two people who both love the same person with mental illness, you can't fix. You can't fix, and you have to acknowledge that with each other. It's not your job to fix each other. And for another family member, maybe somebody from an extended family or a professional, we can only walk beside you. We can't fix. We only can walk beside somebody who's grieving, or somebody who is, I think you're grieving the losses that are associated with mental illness. These sunflowers all belong to a family, just like you're all members of a family, and yet each family member is different. So every family member is going to have had a different relationship with the person who's now sick. They also have their own paths. So sometimes I think the assumption is, well, we're all a family, we all love this person, we all react the same way. It doesn't seem to work that way. So this is just acknowledging that, there are as many people in the family, as many reactions you have. So the bigger the family, the more reactions you're going to have. So how can we help? And I'm throwing that out very loosely, whether it's, within an extended family or professionally. I think it's very important to respect our individuality, and especially within a family, the individuals all react differently. Just as these butterflies are all different, no two butterflies are the same, no two people are the same, and people react differently. And I think we have to trust the wisdom of the family. That, and family members too struggling with mental illness, I think we have to think of our own resilience and what we as family members know. We know ourselves and we know this person. And I think sometimes it gets lost, just in the whole turmoil of coping. I think we have to honor the protectiveness that family members feel for one another. This is Mama Robin with her babies, and that's normal. We want to protect our nest, and that's okay. So there's no judgment in any of this. And most of all, and this is really to the professionals, we need to use our 2 ears and 1 mouth, so we listen more than we speak, because we can't fix. Our job isn't to fix, and sometimes health professionals, we like to fix. We like tidying up things. So it's very important to remember, it's not our job to fix, but we can walk beside you and we can listen way more than we can speak, because you guys are the experts of your experience. You're having it. Nothing I do or say is going to change it or fix it. When I had the grief center and worked with families and kids, I had a graffiti, a door, and so this is what a 10-year-old wrote. A lot of people try to fix things or but all you need is for them to just sit there and listen. The wisdom of a 10-year-old. But yes, I think this is what we need to do. And you mentioned there are no rules or no right or wrong about any of this. And I'm just throwing stuff out, and you may not like it, and that's okay. It's just that there are no rules. Our society likes rules. We like rules, we have rules, and I think it gets in the way of coping sometimes because of all these, voices we hear in our head, literally telling us you can't do this or you can't do that. And I think that nobody likes to be should upon. So if people are telling you what you should be doing, it's not helpful. I think it's okay to say, would you like to tell me your story? And again, I think in the context maybe of an extended family member who's worried about another family member, maybe inviting them to what's happened, what's your story, what do you need, what would you like, how can I help? So what we're doing is we're opening it up to the person who's facing this challenge rather than telling them what they should do. What do you need? Because you are the expert of you. And I think that, as Bev mentioned, we need to acknowledge the need for care for ourselves. And I think when you're coping with the ups and downs of mental illness in a family, we put ourselves last on that old totem pole. And so this is just a reminder that we have to look after ourselves in order to look after the people that we love. And Virginia Satir says it very well. When I take care of me, I give something to you. So sometimes we need a reminder to look after me. So, how are you being good to yourself? Are you buying yourself flowers? Or if you're waiting for somebody to give them to you, maybe buy them yourself, if you like flowers. Chocolate cake. Sometimes we just need a piece of chocolate cake. Guilt-free. All this stuff has to be guilt-free, or it cancels it out. But, you have to think about what nourishes you, because you're giving out a lot in coping with this challenge in your family. And so it's important to realize that takes its toll. And I like that term, running on empty. We do, we run on empty. And you know what? When your car runs on empty, you put gas in it. So you have to figure out what you need when you're running on empty. And it could be anything, like from a warm bath or 10 minutes by yourself to a run or book, anything, it doesn't matter. But I think we're not very good about thinking what we need for ourselves. Do we allow ourselves to experience joy so much that our toes curl? Like it's okay. And I encountered this in my bereavement groups where people were very reluctant and felt very guilty for experiencing a moment of joy when their person had just died. And I think it's the same way when you're dealing with the challenges of mental illness, then you think you can't feel joy. It's okay. It's okay to have a joyous moment because it doesn't mean anything in terms of how you love or dealing with your person or the crisis in your family. It's just okay. So that's just a reminder. And Jon, mindfulness is very big these days, and Jon Kabat Zinn has written a book called Wherever You Go, There You Are. And a number of years ago I was at a workshop that he gave, and there's a group like this, and he gave us all a raisin. And he said, okay, close your eyes, put that raisin in your mouth, and he went through all the senses. Don't eat it. He says, now just think about it. And what does it feel like in your mouth? And what does it taste like? I mean, who's ever done that with a raisin? You gobble a box down usually. So that was a really good exercise of just being in the moment. Because if you are, for example, having a massage, and you're relaxed, and you're starting to think, okay, when I get here, I have to go to Loblaws because I have to get this for dinner. It cancels out the massage, totally. So you have to be in the moment and just enjoy that moment, and that will fill you up to help you cope. And we could do a whole workshop. I do whole workshops just on running on empty. So that is something you really need to think about, what fills you up. Gilda Radner wrote It's Always Something. She wrote this book documenting her battle with ovarian cancer. She describes how when she was writing her book, she so much wanted to triumph over cancer. She wanted the perfect ending. This is what she wrote. Now I've learned the hard way that some poems don't rhyme, and some stories don't have a clear beginning, middle, and end. Like my life, this book has ambiguity. Like my life, this book is about not knowing, having to change, taking the moment, making the best of it, without knowing what's going to happen next. And I just thought that perhaps is what it's like for you guys. So that you're adjusting to learning to live with that, not knowing what's going to happen, and is it going to be sustained. And that may be as good as it gets. I'm going to read Otherwise again now, and I've put the words here. I got out of bed on 2 strong legs. It might have been otherwise. I ate cereal, sweet milk, flawless peach. It might have been otherwise. I took the dog uphill to the birchwood. All morning I did the work I love. At noon I lay down with my mate. It might have been otherwise. We ate dinner together at a table with silver candlesticks. It might have been otherwise. I slept in a bed in a room with paintings on the walls and planned another day just like this day. But one day, I know, it will be otherwise. The author, Jane Kenyon, battled depression throughout most of her adult life. And a collection of works entitled Otherwise is a book of 20 poems that chronicles the uncertainty of living that she felt. So perhaps learning to live with and striving to live truly in the moment is the best that we can hope for when we are coping with the uncertainties of mental illness. We cannot fix a family who is coping with someone they love who has mental illness. However, we can honor the losses, accompany that family on their journey, helping them to explore the many losses they're encountering, listening to their stories, and acknowledge their pain in a non-judgmental way. Because it's only by grieving what has been lost that we can celebrate what is left.